Hey there, Krackin Canuckleheads. We continue to whirl around the Pacific Division, and tonight, we're talking about the Calgary Flames. What a wacky, weird story it has been. Division champs 3 years ago. Today, entirely different management. Well, Craig Conroy was the assistant GM back then. Entirely different lineup. It's pretty nuts. And such a great city for hockey, such a great rink, old school. It's kind of the Joe Louis Arena of the West. Anyway, Derek Wills has been the play-by-play man on the radio for 11 years there. He's one of the guys I know a little less about, have spent less time with over the years in the National Hockey League, but a wonderful gentleman, super, super nice guy, very popular in the market. And he's going to tell us all about what the hell's going on with the Calgary Flames. And we're going to start with the heavy stuff. I'm not going to lie to you. We'll get through that, and then we'll talk about what's happening with this team and what type of threat they may be this season in the Pacific Division and the National Hockey League. Don't forget, you can check out all these videos YouTube at Simmerpuck or Simmerpuck, and same as my ex Twitter handle at Simmerpuck. And you can also follow up with some things at, or not at, VancouverHockeyInsider.com, SeattleHockeyInsider.com. Lots of topics being typed up and talked about on those websites. All right, Derek, let's get into it about these Calgary Flames. What the hell is going on? Oh my gosh, and here he is, Derek Wills himself in his Miami Dolphins regalia. What is going on, Miami Dolphin guy in Calgary?
Well, they finally won today, which was a pleasant surprise. I was actually at the Dolphins home opener.
Wow.
Yeah, against the Jaguars. I've been a fan for 40 years since I saw them on television in the Super Bowl in 1984. And that was actually the first home game that I had ever been to. So they won that week, thankfully, but lost the last three. So it was good to see them get back into the win column without Tua today.
Since so where were you watching the game in 1984?
Oh, just on television at home in Ontario. Wasn't a football fan, but I liked their colors. So became a fan of the Dolphins because I liked their colors. And then Dan Marino obviously won me over. Was a huge fan of his until he retired in 1999, and then 20 plus starting quarterbacks until they drafted Tua Tagovailoa, and got my Tua jersey on today, even though he wasn't playing. But yeah, huge Dolphins fan. Grew up 40 minutes from Buffalo, so when the Bills beat the Dolphins, which they did fairly regularly back in the 90s, couldn't go to school for 2-3 days because well, I just get absolutely raked over the coals. But no, it's fun being a fan on Thursdays or Sundays or Mondays, especially when they win like they did today. So I'm a happy camper today.
Very unique. So was that GTA or the Hammer or St. Catherine? Oh, no, St. Catharines is really close to Buffalo. So like the Hammer or GTA?
Closer, Port Colborne, Ontario. So right down Highway 3, you go through Fort Erie and then right into
Yeah.
Buffalo across the Peace Bridge.
Okay. By the way, Bill Daly, the deputy commissioner of the National Hockey League, huge Miami Dolphins fan.
Oh, that's good to know.
So yeah, if you run into Bill in a press box somewhere, make sure you hit him up because he is a huge Dolphins fan. By the way, Dan Marino was phenomenal. I loved watching him. Never got the ring, never got the trophy.
Yeah, it's too bad. Probably the best quarterback that doesn't have a Super Bowl ring, but I'm hoping Tua wins one. Wins one. I during the pandemic was so bored. I bought over 500 of his rookie cards. So if you can
Wow.
win an MVP or a Super Bowl, that would help my cause and help my investment a little bit.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're not here to talk about the NFL, although it's entertaining. I want to talk about heavy stuff first, get heavy stuff out of the way. And that would be it's been an ugly, tragic few months, many months. The Flames lose assistant GM Chris Snow to ALS. The Johnny Gaudreau incident, obviously, there's no words. How are you handling it personally in terms of your relationships with these guys? How is the team and community handling it as we get everybody's probably happy to get a season started, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, really don't think about how I've handled it. I just think about everybody who's truly been impacted, and as I guess part of the Flames extended family, it hasn't been the easiest year in a bit. Lost Chris Snow just over a year ago. after his courageous battle with ALS. And I think he brought a lot of awareness and helped to raise a lot of money. And his wife, Kelsey, and their kids have certainly been strong throughout all the ups and downs, and certainly more downs than ups. But yeah, that certainly was hard. And just had the 1 year anniversary of his passing. So brought back a lot of memories, both good ones and bad ones. We certainly all miss Snow. And yeah, you're right. No words for what happened to Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew. I mean, I remember I was sitting by the fire that night and saw something pop up on Twitter, and it's almost something you can't believe because you don't want to believe it. But then, a few hours passed that night, and when there was no denials, I started to worry. And then, of course, we found out the next day that they had tragically lost their lives. So, yeah, I mean, I got to call Johnny Gaudreau's games for 8 years. I didn't call his first NHL game. Peter Marr, in his last game, did Johnny Gaudreau's first game and called his first goal, but called every single preseason, regular season, postseason game that he played with the Flames for 8 years. And it was an absolute honor. He was the most exciting player the Flames had and had in a long, long time, prior to me even, and brought fans out of their seats, brought me out of my seat. Almost every single one of the biggest moments during my first 8 seasons calling Flames games involved Johnny Gaudreau, whether it was in his first full year and my first year, a hat trick he scored against the Kings in the final game before Christmas to help the Flames snap an 8-game losing streak and go into the holiday break on a high. And I still believe that if he wouldn't have scored that hat trick and they wouldn't have won that game, they wouldn't have made the playoffs and wouldn't have won around that year. Yeah. His assist on Jaromir Jagr's last NHL goal, which just brought Scotiabank Saddledome, the entire sea of red, to its feet. And of course, the biggest goal that he scored as a member of the team was in overtime of Game 7 against the Stars back in 2022, which set up the first Battle of Alberta in the Stanley Cup playoffs in 31 years. But just a magician on the ice, off the ice. Got to know him and got to know his family. Great guy, fantastic family. And I still feel for Guy and Jane losing not one son, but 2 sons on the eve of their daughter's wedding. It's almost something that's unimaginable, Rob. Yeah. And I can't imagine how the family feels, and how they've managed to get through it. Strong group for sure.
I haven't brought this up ever on any of these programs or as a guest anywhere yet, but I do. One thing that stands out, I didn't run into him maybe once that entire time he was in Calgary. I had a chance to chat with him in the dressing room, but I was in UFA when he and JT Miller and Team USA won the, I was working for TSN when they won the gold for Team USA, and he was approachable and just kind and mellow and humble, where, a lot of these 19-year-olds, a 19-year-old tournament, cocky, kind of, I'm the shit. He was just a really genuine character. And I remember spending more time with him and a couple other guys in particular that, you just liked kind of chatting with and catching up, finding out what was going on. And he was cool about it. So all the stuff you hear about him off the ice is incredible. So,
yeah. And I mean, we watched him grow up here in Calgary. Yeah. He went from being a kid right out of college to, an NHL player who really likes Skittles. I remember his teammates just used to give him such a hard time over that. And then we watched him grow up and get married and have kids and become a man. So I think that's why we probably have such a tie to him here in Calgary, is not only because of what he did on the ice for 8 years, and he was, again, just electrifying on the ice, but off the ice, we watched him go from being a kid right out of college to being a husband and a father. Just so tragic, the way it all happened, the fact that it happened, period. And it was really cool to see Guy Gaudreau, who just loves the game of hockey so much, back on the ice. And what a great gesture by John Tortorella to bring him out and to help get his mind off of things, even if only for an hour or two.
Yeah, absolutely. So Johnny Hockey and the entire group, that, correct me if I'm wrong, it's only been 3 seasons since the team won the division, and just kicked ass, and then it just seems hard to believe what's kind of unfolded. It's been an exodus for in a lot of different directions. Brad Treleving's gone, the GM's in Toronto, Daryl Sutter was fired. I was just looking at your depth chart, trying to figure out the numbers. Probably 80% of the forwards are different. Jonathan Huberdeau, since he's been around, has underachieved. He's probably the poster boy for maximizing contract years. Not to pick specifically on him. And then your decor is swapped out and your goaltenders. Um, Dustin Wolf, let's start there. Dustin Wolf, I love that kid. I saw him play Seattle last week or a week and a half ago. Just so, Western League goalie of the year, American League goalie of the year at one point. Really entertaining. Little guy compared to most. And so you're probably in good shape there with Dan Vladar, I think the former Bruin, right? So,
Yeah, I think that's the biggest question for me, Rob, though. I mean, you go from having an elite number one guy in Jacob Markstrom,
yeah,
who's off to a great start to the season with the Devils, to having, I think, a question mark in the crease. You've got three guys who have battled and who have all played at a pretty high level during training camp and the preseason. I think Devin Cooley is going to be the odd man out, and they'll go with the tandem of Dan Vladar and Dustin Wolf, and it'll be a true tandem. They would love for one of these guys to be the 1A. But right now, I would say that the plan is to go 41 and 41 and hope one guy earns more games. Like that's kind of the Flames plan written in pencil right now. Dustin Wolf has accomplished, outside of winning a Calder Cup, everything that they can at the AHL level, and they had to open up a spot for him. They did with that Markstrom trade to the Devils, and now it's up to him to prove that he can be the next UC Saros type because he is undersized. He's not a small man.
no,
He's just small by NHL goaltending standards,
yeah.
but he has been the best at every level. Western Hockey League, American Hockey League, two-time goaltender of the year, the first goalie to win league MVP since his goaltending coach, Jason LaBarbera, did it way back when. So now it's his time to prove that he can play at a high level in the NHL, and he'll be given an opportunity to do that his first full season in the league. So we'll see how that goes. Dan Vladar coming off of hip surgery in March has looked good. So we'll see. For me, that's still the biggest question, though, Rob, because I think if the Flames can get average or slightly above average goaltending, they could be competitive on a night-to-night basis and maybe hang around in the playoff race. But if they don't, it'll be tough because not only do you lose Jacob Markstrom, you also lose two of your best defensemen late last season. And Chris Tanev, maybe the best defensive defenseman of the game, and Noah Hannafin, who was playing at a really high level. So they lose those two guys. They're hoping that with some depth, they can fill those two spots. And up front, I actually quite like them. I still think they need a number one centerman at some point in time. But, their group of 12 forwards looks pretty good to me. So we'll see how it all plays out. And if they get good goaltending, I think they're going to be a fun team to watch this year.
There's got to be an element of just chemistry or juggling lines or trying to figure out, put these new bodies together in various combinations not expansion like, but rebuild ish, but in a weird way because it's just happened so quickly. Like it hasn't been that long, and here we are meshing all these new pieces of the puzzle. Have they been experimenting? That's regular and special teams. It's just a lot of different looks.
A little bit. Trying to figure out who their other middle six centerman is going to be has been something they've been trying to do since the start of training camp in the preseason. So you've got Nazem Kadri, who is a good number one or number two guy. You've got Michael Backlund, who's a good number two or number three guy, but you need someone else to play in your middle six. Martin Pospisil is getting a long look. I still wonder if he can be more effective as a winger. He was really, really good getting under the skin of his opponents and was fairly productive offensively in his first season in the league. Can he play that type of role at center where you tend to have different responsibilities and have to stay a little bit higher if you're not that F1? We'll have to wait and see. Yegor Sharangovich, who got nicked up in the last preseason game, I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that he's okay, is another guy who played quite a bit up the middle last season. They could fall back to him. Connor Zary played a little bit at center late last season. So those are kind of the three guys who are in the mix for that. One area where they're hoping to be better this year and kind of pick up where they left off last year is on the power play, which was quite frankly putrid for most of the year. But they made a change as far as who was coaching the power play, going from Mark Savard, who's no longer with the organization, to Cale McLean late last season. And we're top 10 power play in the last 20 to 30 games. So McLean's running that power play. They've got the same first unit, the same 5 guys. So they built some chemistry together. They'll try some different guys on their second power play unit. So some similarities as to what we saw last season, some changes. But on the back end, they're different. I mean, you subtract Tanev and Hanifin, and yeah, they've got some depth, but maybe not depth as far as their top 4 is concerned, like they had a year ago. Up front, they're hoping some young players take a step, kind of like Connor Zary and Martin Pospisil did last season. And Sam Honzek was the surprise of training camp in the preseason. A first-round pick a couple of years ago who looked like a fish out of water at training camp in the preseason last year and didn't have a good season going back to junior as the captain of the Vancouver Giants. Didn't stand out at the Young Stars Classic, and then the preseason started. And Rob, you were at that game in Seattle, which was kind of his coming out party, that 6-1 victory over the Kraken. He has been brilliant ever since. No one thought he would sniff this team, and now it looks like he's going to be on the opening day roster. So they're hoping some young guys take a step. And you mentioned Jonathan Huberdeau. So they bring in Anthony Mantha, who they think is on paper at least going to be a good fit for him as a shooter because Huberdeau is a passer. Still looking for a centerman for those 2 guys. It is Martin Pospisil right now, but if Huberdeau gets to being a 100-point player again, or even a point-a-game player again, that'll be huge for the Flames as they are going to have to score more goals this season than they did last.
It's always more fun when the Flames are good, by the way, in the Pacific Division. It's just more entertaining when everything's amped up. I mean, the Battle of Alberta, I've been to a few, blessed to have been to a few of those games, especially in your building. It's phenomenal. So it's great to look forward to. How, just for part of our audience, where do the Canucks rank on the hate meter below the Oilers? Like how far below?
Oh, way below.
Way below.
Yeah, I mean, when the
Has it
Oilers
gone up a little bit
good,
more? Is it gone up a little bit more lately, or is it still?
No, I think it's gone down
Really?
because the Oilers were so bad for so long that it was hard to hate them. They were so good for so long, so it was easy to hate them, and then they were so bad for so long, it was harder to hate them. It's easy to hate them now because they have 2 of the best players in the world and went to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, and they eliminated the Flames the last time they got to the Stanley Cup playoffs. So the Canucks, I think for a while they were probably the Flames' biggest rival, and then the 2 teams met in the playoffs in 2015, and that certainly threw some fuel on the fire. And they had guys who were easy to hate as players, like Kevin Bieksa. But the Canucks struggled for a number of years. They're good again, so maybe that will spark a rivalry. But I feel like it's hard to really build an intense rivalry unless both teams are good. So it's up to the Flames to be better this season than they were last. I think the Canucks are one of the top 2 teams in the division with the Oilers. So I think they're going to be good. So if the Flames are good, then I think that can be a really intense rivalry again. And that's how the season will open. Flames Canucks at Rogers Arena in Vancouver, October 9th.
That's right. Good point. I'm glad it's a perfect way to wrap things up as we tease the season opener. I appreciate it. I wish the Flames the best. I've always had a soft spot for the organization and everything else and their fans and the building. And we've covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. And I appreciate you taking the time on a Miami Dolphins Sunday, for God's sakes. So good on you, and have a great broadcast and a great season coming up. I think it's going to be a fun, interesting one for you.
I hope so, Rob. Fun to chat with you, and looking forward to seeing you around the rink this season.
There he is, Calgary's biggest Miami Dolphins fan. That is something else. And they got the win on Sunday. All right. Thank you, Derek. Have a great show coming up and a great season. We'll see how the Flames do. It could be a threat. I'm really curious to see what Jonathan Huberdeau does this season. We'll see you next time on Krackin Canuckleheads. Cheers.